Welcome back to the Catholic Founders Podcast, where we explore and clarify the principles Catholic entrepreneurs should implement into their lives and their companies. Today, we are speaking with Trevor Alcorn, one of the owners of Tridentine Brewing, a beer company making beautiful products that are helping expose more people to the Catholic faith. They are in the process of actually scaling up their business to actually a commercial scale. And initially, when they started doing this, it was just doing home brews and posting about it on Twitter. Things actually went very viral for them early on, so they knew there was a demand for their products. And now they continue to grow the company to meet that demand. I can say, thankfully, their beer is actually sold in Wisconsin, but getting through compliance in each state is a little bit difficult. So they're going through the process of scaling up around the country. So if it's not in your state, be patient. They'll get there eventually. Today's conversation, we really talk a little bit about their mission to brew beer for the greater glory of God. Broadly, we talk about that mission. Then we talk about how they ended up where they are today, how Trevor thinks about building a family business and his thoughts on passing the company down to his children one day. We also discuss putting money in the correct order of things, right? Not focusing on money for money's sake. And finally, we wrap up with how he thinks that Catholic entrepreneurs can influence the world towards God. I think he's a very good example to learn from because they're doing this in a really real way. So enjoy this conversation and be sure to give Trevor a follow on Twitter at Tridentine Brew, Twitter or X. All right, enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the show, Trevor. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Silas. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you on. I was just joking before we hit record. You and I have gone back and forth on Twitter quite a lot. I don't encourage people to look at my Twitter because I sometimes go unhinged, but we've gone back and forth on Twitter a lot. I know of you mainly through Charlie Westerman, actually, a good friend of mine. I think you guys are pretty close generally. Is that correct? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair to say. Yeah, Charlie and I are friends.
Charlie's a great guy. I had him with a bunch of other my Praxis friends up to Wisconsin this past summer, so he got to do some hillbilly stuff with me, and it was a good time. But anyways, we're here to talk about you and learn a little bit more about what you're doing and understand kind of how you run your business. So maybe for those unfamiliar, give us just a little bit of a rundown of who you are and what you're working on.
Yeah, so Trevor Alcorn. I live in the family in Northern Illinois, so about an hour's drive south of Chicago or so. And so really this whole brewery thing or family brewing has a really long history. So just to kind of shorten it up for the audience, brewing's been in the family, home brewing at least, has been in the family for generations. So I think it goes all the way back to as far as we can find recorded, back to my great-grandmother, and she brewed in Chicago during Prohibition in her bathtub. Don't know that I would have liked to have had that, but then it goes even to my grandfather, and then my father brewed, and so that's really what got the family going, is just that interest in the family and brewing together. And so really the genesis of Tridentine goes back to my father and I. So my father was brewing before I was, and then he had a little bit of a gap. And maybe about 12, 13 years ago, I found home brewing equipment in the basement while my parents were moving. And I said, "Hey, Dad, what is this?" And he's like, "Oh, it's old home brewing equipment." I said, "All right, let's do it together." So we started up again. It was just very casual for many years until about 5 years ago, where we decided, okay, let's take this to the next level. Let's maybe do some branding on it. Again, this is just all at home still. This was nothing commercial. There was really no plans at doing anything commercial at the time. And my brother is a graphic designer, so he helped join in as kind of a family effort of branding the brews and designing recipes and everything else. So it was a really fun hobby, and I started posting about it online actually as well. So I started our social media accounts again just for fun, but then really a couple of years ago we decided, let's see if we can't just take this commercial, just because we had so much interest in it, more than just the online world, just from family and friends as well in real life. And so we decided, let's go ahead and give this a go. So that's really what we've been doing the past year, is bringing this to market, making it available for others beyond family and friends. So that's what we've been doing since October timeframe.
Nice. No, I love this. I think this is I love the fact that it's I guess you could say like a family kind of thing that's been going on just kind of in the background for a while. And I'm assuming it obviously was done in some ways to pay the bills and make some side change at the bare minimum. But now, trying to turn it into like an earnest business, if you will, right? I always find this kind of history stuff with families interesting because a lot of people like the family businesses die out a lot, right? And they die out not because of, the business fundamentals aren't there. It's often because there's just not enough communication about it or because the kids just don't, purely don't have an interest. So that it goes to show some good things about you guys, your family, being able to work together.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's definitely key. And I can't really speak as much from the business side because we just went into the business side,
Mhm.
right? But you're absolutely correct that there has to be that interest there, right? Because if I didn't have that interest, certainly it wouldn't have continued on, right? I mean, and same thing for my father. So there definitely has to be that there. And I mean, I've seen it even from others and even local community businesses, right, where you see it where there's a good thing going and then it just dies out because there's not that interest there or the family member wants to do something else. So yeah, if you can hook those people in the family and then have that good communication, that good structure to pass it on, then yeah, you can have something that can thrive for
Yeah.
generations.
We'll definitely talk a little bit more about that. I am really curious as somebody who just loves to know how things work. How do you actually go from being like kind of doing homebrew stuff to actually, let's call it, starting a beer company? Like how do you actually do that? What does it look like? What permits you got to get, etc.
Mhm. Yeah. So typically what you would do, so if you wanted to make the jump, and there's a lot of brewers that do make the jump from home brewing to commercial brewing, and home brewing is massive in the United States. I mean, there's more than a million home brewers in the United States, and there's actually, I believe, more than 5,000 individual breweries in the United States. So that's a very common way for people to make that jump. Now, how people typically make the jump is they will set up their own microbrewery and they'll sell out of their own tap room. So
Hmm.
there's a few things you need to do. You need to get there's a federal license, your state license. And so there could be a few licenses right there just to even get started and get going. You need your local health license. So there's a full array of red tape that you have to
Hmm.
go through to get set up. From our standpoint, we approached it differently. It's a bit novel, and it's been good for us and it's been bad. Bad in that it's been more difficult to get going initially and to get buy-in from distribution because the idea itself is just new. So we decided we wanted to skip the taproom idea. So we didn't necessarily want to start out by putting in all the capital investment without seeing if this was going to work, if there was a general interest in it, and we didn't necessarily want to start out running a tap room. So we decided let's just go contract manufacturing route initially. So that's what we did. So we still had to get a bunch of licenses federally, state, so distribution licenses, but we worked with a contract manufacturing brewery to bring the beer commercially available. So for us, it was a bit different. So I won't say it's the typical route. In
Hmm.
fact, it's very atypical. But that's what we had to do. But there's an incredible amount of legal hurdles to get over the finish line to make it available.
So is it relatively straightforward? I mean, you just need to spend a certain amount of money to get these licenses, or is there all this like kind of documentation or things that kind of make it really panic? I'm always curious about this, the regulatory burdens.
Um, yeah, so it can be it can be relatively straightforward as long as you so for example, if you went the typical route, there's a pretty well defined path. So you just need a preferably you can file it by yourself, but if you have a good lawyer, especially a good beer or alcohol lawyer, they can kind of walk you through the steps of putting in for the various licenses and help you file the paperwork so it doesn't get rejected. Because sometimes the government will sit on the paperwork for months
Mm.
before reviewing it, and if you have it wrong and they reject it, then you've lost
Yeah.
several months. So we found that out. Not that ours has been rejected, but just the process and how long it takes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's not necessarily difficult, but for us it was more difficult in that the path was not as well defined, the set of licenses, and working with each individual state, because each individual state varies quite dramatically sometimes in the type of licenses that they have and what you're required to get, and what you can actually even do. So in our case, we're self-distributing, for example. So some states allow you to self-distribute yourself, and others don't allow you to self-distribute, or not quite the same way. So there's like rules on, well, you can sell to this bar, but in another state, well, you can't sell directly to a bar. You actually need to sell to another distributor who has a certain
regulatory
specific
capture,
license. Right. So it's difficult. But yeah, to answer the question, if someone was wanting to do this, set up their own brewery, it would not necessarily be super difficult, but there's definitely quite a few hurdles to get over from just a red tape standpoint.
What about when you wanted to go to contract manufacturer? I'm just really curious, like, are there a lot of options for companies who can like contract manufacture beer, and how do you like manage like transfer of to make sure that the recipe turns out the same and everything?
Yeah. So there are a number of breweries that do contract manufacturing. So some breweries are just set up to just do contract manufacturing, and other breweries are set up to where they actually have their own lines of beer and they supplement their income by doing contract manufacturing. So there are different like resources out there, different websites. Even the Home Brewers Association has different resources available where they have like a list of, here's available contract manufacturers. So it's pretty common even amongst other established breweries that if they need additional capacity or a special brew or something, that they'll contract it out as well. So so that's how we started with looking into it. And for us, we did a little bit of research a couple of years ago, actually a lot of research into like who we wanted to partner with, because that was an important thing. We wanted to make sure that they were the right fit for us, and that we could actually start out with some smaller batches. So a lot of times the contract manufacturers, they have a very like high limit to start. They want X number of barrels to start, and it can be very difficult to get in initially, like doing what we're doing. But luckily, we were able to find a really great partner. Carbon 4 is their name, the brewery in Madison, Wisconsin, and they're great to work with. They really believe in the vision. They could see the vision that we had, and so they were really willing to work with us as we kind of like got started, and didn't necessarily have these massive batch sizes. So that was kind of the initial part of selecting the partner. Now, as to the question in regards to the brew, the taste, that is definitely a process in itself to scale up batches. So we had to take our existing homebrew recipes and scale it up for massive distribution. Now, it might seem, and you might think at first, oh, this is no big deal. You just increase the size of the batches. It just makes sense, right? That's what you think. It's not necessarily the case, especially when you're looking at what the more complex equipment that the manufacturer has, as well as their ability to buy in bulk certain ingredients and what they already have on hand. So we were able to sit down with some of their brewmasters and craft our recipes to scale it up using slightly different ingredients sometimes, but also knowing that they were able to guide us through and say, well, you've used, for example, XYZ grain on your grain bill. And we can get that for you, that specialty grain, but we actually have this other grain and we're able to get it at a much lower cost and it has a very similar flavor profile. Is that okay? Can we change that? And so we went over the spreadsheet with like 100 different ingredients, literally, plugging things in and changing the profile out. And so it was a really blessing to work with some people who are really experts in their field to be able to craft it and test it out. And so to be able to taste it, for example, we were also taking that recipe and also like scaling it down on our
On
equipment
your
at
side.
home and seeing like, yeah, how does this taste?
Mhm.
And so we were able to get that that flavor profile there to like ensure, yeah, this is exactly
good.
what we want it to taste like.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. I mean, the one maybe lesson for people there is not to be too precious about your let's call it invention. In this case, it's recipe. But if you want to achieve great things, sometimes you might have to make some adjustments along the way and learn from the experts, right? I think this is something a lot of people fail to achieve larger scale because they are afraid of the way things are. They're not familiar with, right? And if you can be willing to set aside those pieces, you can grow just like you grow in the spiritual life through achieving new levels, right? So
Yes.
maybe we'll talk more about the beer company and the nuances there at some point. But this is a really good overview, I think. I am very curious. It sounds like you may have already alluded to it, but how did you end up getting the entrepreneurship bug in the first place? Has this just been something kind of running in the family?
Yeah, you know what? That's it's really interesting because this is actually the first business that I've run. Actually, the first business that my father has run as well. So it's not as if this is the 100th business that we've stood up, and this is just runs in the blood. And as I had mentioned earlier, this wasn't necessarily something that we had set out from the beginning to say, okay, we want to do this. We want to create a business. However, there always was this kind of like background desire in the family to do some type of brewery. Like we had been batting the idea around for like 10 or 15 years in the family, like, oh, what if we set up our own tap room in our small town? And that would be pretty cool. And so the idea had always been there, but I don't think it really took off, it really grabbed us until we kind of saw that social media response. In fact, even one of the reasons why I put the idea for the company out there was because I saw the idea like 5 years ago. I thought, man, this could be like a really, really cool idea to turn into a business eventually, even if it's not our exact idea to do it right now, but it could be something because I don't necessarily see something quite like it out in the market, and I could see it as being successful. So to answer your question, Silas, I wish I could tell you that, yeah, we've always had this bug, that we've always been inventing things or always have our own businesses on the side, but that's not always been the case. But I think just being able to see the vision for this company, several years ago, and being able to see that initial response from people and the reaction to it, I think really spurred us on to say, yeah, let's go ahead and give this a go.
Mm-hmm. No, actually, that's very similar to what I find with a lot of people. Is it's especially in the Catholic sphere, is entrepreneurship isn't exactly their first thought, because I think if you investigate a lot of the people who are really really living their faith, they're really focused on their vocation, right? Like getting married and having kids, and they're like, how do I provide for them? Their first thought is not usually entrepreneurship. I think maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's not. But a lot of people have this idea, right? They're like, oh, maybe I could start a business, but I don't even really know where to go. I'm not sure like how to start. So I guess you've got kind of followed that path. But for other people who are in the shoes of, um, I kind of have an interest, but I'm not sure. What are your thoughts on how they should investigate let's call it the calling, if you will, from God, if they should pursue this, and if they do, how would you recommend kind of going about that and getting started?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad that you brought in the aspect of God, because I think that's important, right? Even if it's not just even purely if it's from a uh, prayerfully considering it point of view, as opposed to making it like explicitly Catholic, like what we're doing, right? So I think, yes, you need to pray about it, and you need to discern, and if you're married, obviously including discussing it with your spouse to see is this the right time, is this the right move for the family as well. But certainly I think another aspect of it is in regards to is it right for the family, the timing is, also, is it something that you can chew off and actually do? Something like the brewing company, I'll be honest, I'm helping out with, But if it was something that I had to do full time with my job, I'm not sure that I could do it. So that's something that also needs to be considered, is what I'm looking to do. Is this something that I can do as kind of a side hustle, or do I really need to, drop everything and do it full time? Can I do that with the income where I'm at in my life right now? But certainly if you discern that it's the right move, then definitely go for it and see what you can't do. But definitely it helps as well. And maybe Tridentine is, even though it was unorthodox, maybe I can offer this as well, is that it was helpful to kind of get the reaction from different people beforehand. I mean, we got it in a massive way from social media and all the response that we got, but definitely it's not a bad idea to run it past family, friends, mentors, others, to see, what do they think? Is there a need for it? Do they think it could be successful? Before you just maybe decide, yeah, this is a great idea. You throw it out there, you put all this investment into it, and, maybe in reality is there was not a need, or maybe the idea wasn't fully baked yet. So definitely leverage the people in your life that are trusted to help you with that, as you get going, to give you that guidance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a really good point. I think a lot of, I usually refer to them as baby entrepreneurs, right? Like your first time thinking about the idea or pursuing the interest. Usually your ideas suck. That's just the truth. So if anybody hasn't, if you find yourself in this, if you're one of these people who you'd consider in the shoes of Discerning, I would really recommend reading this book called The Mom Test. It's a really short book, that kind of like a guide on how to identify whether or not your idea is something that really has legs. Because a lot of people have ideas, but not a lot of those ideas solve problems. So you need to make sure that's right, especially if you're going to go full hog and just like make it your full-time thing, which is something I want to ask you about now. So this idea that you mentioned, okay, maybe going full time would have made this impossible for me to do, if you were to just kind of say, I'm gonna full send this. It doesn't seem very prudent for my family, etc. But a lot of businesses, I think, do start in kind of like as a side hustle, and it can provide supplemental income for your family. I'm a big fan of this idea that I guess you could say between a spouse, especially if you're in a single income family, the spouse can kind of like run some side projects and keep things, extra income coming in to feed all those large Catholic families. And I'm just curious of your idea on, generally speaking, this principle of, we need to provide for our families, and the way the world works, a lot of the corporations out there are running, and they're continuing to kind of pursue further and further, is they don't value the worker, right? They value the income that the worker provides for them as a business, and they value their quarterly earnings, but they're very willing to do a bunch of layoffs and let people go, and that's very difficult if you're a single income family, right? So do you have any thoughts on this like whole idea of Catholics starting to pursue more side gigs, which eventually, may turn into a full-time thing? But any thoughts there?
Yeah, I fully support it. I'm definitely behind, if there's a way that, you can kind of get out of that corporate maze and, not beholden to the man, so to speak. And if you could do that, then definitely go for it. Because you're right. I mean, for so many corporations, probably the vast majority, that they kind of view you as a number, right? You're nothing kind of more than a cog in the machine, even if they tell you otherwise. So if there's a way that you can work for yourself, then that's even better. Or work for a smaller business that actually cares about you, rather than just saying it and saying all the right things. And that's the way to go. So in regards to, the side hustle, I mean, I would say 100% back that idea as you laid out, Silas, to really start small and see what you can do and grow it small. The unique situation that we're in, being that it's in the alcohol industry, we could have had opportunities to grow it small, and we could have done it if there wasn't so many regulatory issues. Let me give you an example here. If we, for example, could have sold our homebrewed beer and even shipped it, I think that would have like exponentially helped to grow it faster. We could have started small. It could have been a true side hustle, but that's all illegal, so we never did it. So, but I think for a lot of people and a lot of side hustles, that's not going to be a problem, right? They can start small and they can scale it to a point where maybe it can take over their full-time income, and then they can step away from that other job, and then they can move full-time into the venture that they're pursuing.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think it's difficult. Many people need to view this as an option, right? They need to recognize that this is true. Like, yes, you're going to have to put in some time on the weekends, and you may have less time, for, let's say, precise, really clearly bucketed family time. However, you can actually bring family time into this to an extent because, like, my dad's a carpenter and he runs a cabinetry business. So I grew up working for him, and I was homeschooled, so I learned a lot of my like practical skill sets from being at a shop, taking customer calls, even managing adults when it came to installing the cabinet. So it's like there's just a lot of things you can kind of group together. And what I'm trying to get at is many Catholics who are really focused on the family life will put objections to doing entrepreneurship because they think it's not compatible with their family life, or they'll have to sacrifice certain things. But that's, I think, part of what we are called to do, right? And also, if you want to solve the problem of having corporations that don't care about people, you're gonna have to build your own, right? so you can care about people.
Yes.
But yeah, enough on that point. Let's talk about this. So the first thing I thought about when I was like, okay, we're gonna have this conversation with Trevor is, you have a product which is, most companies would say we need to get people to drink as much beer as possible so that we can sell more, and just kind of this consumerism mindset. So as somebody who's building, again, it's on the side right now, but hopefully someday it'll be full time for you guys. How do you view this idea of building a company where your product is really a consumer product and you make more money if people drink more, right? But also, if people drink too much alcohol, they're becoming drunk, and that's not in alignment with Catholic teaching. So how do you like navigate this? How do you talk about it internally? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So, this is a great question, and in fact, it's something I thought about a lot from a marketing standpoint, and how do we reach people, and even online, I've run into this on social media where I'll say something which maybe is not that controversial, but you're never going to please everyone. It'll rub people the wrong way, and they'll say, I've got comments before, well, why are you saying that? You're you're going to lose customers or whatever. I'm like, listen, I don't really care. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do here is not about driving as much sales as possible, like most of the companies, right? About making something that's so mass appeal that it doesn't really appeal to anyone at the end of the day. So, we're fine with it being more niche, but having a really energetic and strong base of support behind it, and that's fine with us at the end of the day. So, yeah, we want to be able to drive that support. But we also know that there's a market that this is appealing towards, and a market that we're serving, and it's okay that there are people who are not going to like it, or who don't like the messaging, and that's fine. There's thousands of other products out there that will appeal to you, or have a bland message that is going to be okay with you. So from that standpoint, we're okay, or that's the tack that we've been taking, and that we're obviously we're Catholic, we're patriotic and how we're putting ourselves out there. So we're fine if it rubs some people the wrong way and is not going to be sales from every single demographic that's out there. Now, in regards to the the beer, as could be a stumbling block for some people, or pushing mass amounts of beer to increase sales. Yeah, that's I guess a couple things. First of all, that this is craft beer, so in a certain sense the price is higher, right? I mean, so that in itself is also a little bit of a prohibiting factor for some people, because hey, it's a higher price point. We're not selling 30 packs of this stuff. It's usually in like a 6-pack or a 4-pack. The price point shows the quality of it and what's actually being delivered to the consumer. So that's one thing, is that's kind of fighting back against massive, buying this just to sit down and just consume it all at once. Also, for most of the beers that we brew, it would be difficult to sit down and do that, because they are filling on a different level, most of the beers, especially some of the darker stuff. But my message to people as well, who, let's just say, because I'll get this feedback on social media sometimes, like, beer's evil, or, alcohol is evil. And I understand there's people that, even people in our family, more distant relatives, have been touched by alcoholism in their life. And, my message to them would be, yeah, I mean, please don't buy the product. Please, stay away from it. Please drink in moderation, and drink with temperance. That's kind of our message, in that we definitely don't want to cause, or exacerbate problems for people that may struggle with alcoholism or struggle with the temptation to drink too much. In fact, I would say, if anyone does, please abstain from alcohol completely. We don't want to drive up business by creating problems for people that have a struggle in this particular area. But certainly we also want to make sure that we're providing a product for, the demographic, for the market that we are, pursuing, and not just pushing beer just to push beer and to sell.
Yeah, I think this is obviously, I would say, it's a little bit of a noble pursuit, because I think we see that people don't like to believe that it's true, but we see a lot of times it's coming out that there's these entire research departments and big consumer companies of, how can we make this product more addictive, or these different things, so that we can sell more of it. And obviously that all comes from, I would assume it all stems from greed, most likely, the people leading these things, and obviously that's one of the primary vices, so we want to avoid that. And I just think it's important for people to know that there are Catholic founders out there building things, that they're not all about the outcome of more money in their pocket, right? So it's just making, like you said, making a good product for people who hopefully respect this and consume it in moderation, like you said. I think
Absolutely.
it's really, like, it's a whole other topic, but I think Catholics need to take this to heart, because the Protestants always view us as just the people who drink a lot. Which I'm from Wisconsin, so I've seen it plenty. Hey guys, the only way this show grows is through word of mouth. So please share this with a Catholic entrepreneur, current or aspiring. Thank you so much for your support in helping this show grow. All right, back to the show. Well, one more thing on this idea of consumerism is people. It's very permeated through American society, especially. I'm assuming many other Western cultures too. But this idea that we need to have so many things, right? It leads to many people arguing, "Oh, I can't have more kids because I won't be able to afford them." Or in the case of what we're talking about here, I can't start a business because starting a business I won't make enough money initially to be able to afford the lifestyle I have been currently living. Do you have any, I guess, thoughts or maybe opinions on this idea of just purposely living below your means, so that you may have more opportunities to start businesses as a Catholic, for example, or other things?
No, I think that's that's definitely a fantastic point, Silas. And I mean, I can speak to that in a couple different ways. I mean, I like the point that you brought up about children. I think that we see that quite often in society regarding, why, I don't want to have X number of any more children, or X number. I mean, that's a cutoff because for whatever. And usually it's because we have this idea as a society in our mind around what's required. What's the baseline acceptable standard of living, or what I need to do in order to achieve that, to be a good person, a good parent, provide appropriately. And so I think sometimes it's about reevaluating what is actually necessary in our lives. And it may not necessarily be exactly what society tells us and, inputs to us. Again, going back to the children example, do you need to have a whole college fund set up for each and every child before they, graduate high school? And, so there's these things that push a lot of pressure on people, and that they think, okay, well, I can't even do that right off the gate because I need $250,000 for each child just in college, and I can't do that. So I'm gonna only have two children or something like that, because that's what I need to do to fulfill this mandate. It's like, is that really a mandate? Maybe that's just something that's, as society, we've put onto people, and it's not really a real thing that needs to be done. So, but in regards to businesses as well, that you're right. I mean, in order to make some of these things happen for a side hustle, for a side business, that there's probably going to need to be sacrifices along the way, so you can have the startup capital and the investment that you need in order to be able to achieve these things. There may definitely need to be those sacrifices along the way to maybe cut down in some other areas of your life so that you can put aside funding and money towards that vision, because ultimately, as we were talking about previously, that may end up being the sole income for the family, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe it turns into more than a side hustle. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you need to think a little bit longer term in these ventures, as opposed to just the short term. And, again, some of these strictures that society kind of puts on some of these thoughts and about what's acceptable and keeping up with the Joneses, and think about that long-term vision so that we can actually achieve what we need to in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you have to effectively inquire about everything, question everything, right? Do I need, this type of car? Do I need two cars? Do I need this size of house? Like, do I need to take a vacation every year? Like, these things that are, especially in Western culture, considered just like a given, especially if you are raised in like mainstream kind of culture. They're really not, right? Like, these are luxuries that a lot of Western cultures have that are not true, or have not been true for many, many centuries, right? So we should question all these things and ask, do we really need these things? Do we really need to have this? Isn't it attachment to the world in some way? And that can allow us to use our resources better, because I oftentimes find people who are doing far better than some of the families I know, and they have many, many more excuses as to why they can't do something, while those other families who are not doing as financially well are still willing to give their time, give their money, and help others. So I appreciate that perspective. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, lessons from building Tridentine. So are there any particular things throughout this experience of building the company? It seems like you've had a lot of growth in the past few months as well. In particular, any lessons you've learned around how to find customers, landing customers, marketing, distribution, anything like that you want to share? I ideally want to understand some of the spiritual things you've learned from this experience.
Wow. Yeah. So maybe first of all, just a few lessons, some practical advice. I think the number one thing is, don't underestimate the power of connections with people, like real life, or forging those connections that maybe you have on social media as well into real life connections. So let me give you a concrete example of what I'm talking about. So a few years ago, we were asked to speak at a men's conference in Wisconsin up near Appleton. And so we did, and we talked about the home brewery. It was just a home brewery at the time. And we kept in touch with that group and the founder, and we've been up several times since then. In fact, we're basically going up to Appleton every month now when they have their conferences in the winter, and it's actually spawned quite a few contacts and resources for us to be able to continue to expand the brewery. In fact, some really, really exciting opportunities as well as we expand that we just never would have known about if we didn't take that opportunity to connect with people and go out there. So I'd say that's probably one of the number one things one of the number one takeaways is that we really wouldn't have been able to keep on expanding, and not even just expanding, but even the ideas. A lot of the ideas for what we've been doing with the beers and whatnot, they've come from other people. They've come from family, friends, people at church that we've met. The Cristeros beer is a great example of something that we only got from someone that we were, someone at church who came up to us one day and said, "Hey, have you thought of an idea for a beer about the Cristeros?" And they, give us all this information on the Cristeros, and so that really spurred us on to brewing it. So that's one thing. In regards to like spiritually, so our motto for the brewery is brewing beer for the greater glory of God, and it's something that I try to keep, and all of us here, including my father, our brewmaster, our founder, is to really keep that at the forefront of our mind. Are we doing this for God? Are we doing it for our own glorification? What's this about? So trying to evaluate all of our actions along those lines. And I think that's something that we could all do in our own lives, right? Because it's not just about brewing beer for the great glory of God. It's about everything in our life doing for the greater glory of God. So evaluate our actions in that way. So that's one thing that I've been really trying to hone in on the last several years, especially since that's the phrase of the brewery, is reevaluating everything that we're doing through that lens. But I'd also say, for me, it's about more, trusting in God to see what He's going to do with the brewery in this venture. For a lot of people, when they see it online, there's always questions about, well, since I started putting things online in 2021, when can I get it? Where is it available? When are you expanding? Oh, it looks like it's growing. It should be nationwide. It's like, okay, it's slow. It's kind of on God's time in a way, and what doors that He's opening. Not that we're not putting in the effort and we're just, laying back like, oh, God's doing all the work. We're just being patient, and letting God kind of shape the direction of what we're doing in the brewery, and being okay with what happens. I think it rather than like whatever I want, and as fast as I want and as big as we can get it, it's like, okay, however this turns out, even if ultimately at the end it doesn't end up working out, just to let God guide it and see, again, going back to our core statement of doing things for God's greater glory, let Him take it and see where He wants it to go. So that's just been something for me spiritually to grow, to just like let go of things more rather than like my own vision or our own vision for things, and just, hand it over to Him and, be okay with what's happening.
I like this a lot. I think it's something that is sometimes difficult to reconcile. The idea of starting a company is usually, I mean, at least in our current culture, we really put on a pedestal the founders themselves, right? Oh, they had this great vision, blah, blah, blah. They did these things. But, if you really look under the hood, in most cases, it's just that person was able to, they were a little bit lucky, perhaps, or as we would view it, like God's providence had something in store for them. And the people around them were also willing to work and be part of this vision, so they were able to grow this vision. And I think it's easy to just have this idea that it's all about the founder and their idea, and kind of almost worshiping them in a sense. But if you're a Catholic and you genuinely believe in your faith, it's very difficult to build a company with that mentality, because you recognize that, like, what I want does not matter, right? It's only what God wants for me is what matters. And having that I guess you could say, resignation to His will, right? And being willing, like you said, I have the same mentality with my businesses. If it doesn't succeed, I know it's not because I didn't work hard. It's because I put aside time for my family and my faith, and then maybe a little bit of recreation, but the rest of it is really like dedicated towards this business. And if it fails, that's okay. God's trying to teach me something. So I find, maybe this is not a common belief yet, but I find entrepreneurship to be a very spiritual thing in itself, right? Because you have to have, I don't know, even if you're not religious, you have to have some kind of trust in the universe or whatnot, that it will work out for you and that things will go your way. So I really appreciate those lessons. So what you're building is something that I view as really like almost like an idea, and it's really cool because your history with this, as what this could turn into a very nice family business, right? Where ideally, if some of your kids are interested in running it, it can be kind of like a family thing that keeps going on, and provides not only for yourself for income, but also for your kids and maybe many other families who end up working for you. How do you view building this business? Like, again, from a planning perspective, it's one thing because we know God can have His own plans for it, but assuming it continues, how do you view like planning for the future and planning for it to be a sustainable family business and not to be, third generation throws it in the tanker?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, a few things. So, first of all, I mean, we're already at the point where we're exploring, bringing on staff besides from the family, right? So, besides from me kind of doing sweat equity, which is what's going on right now, we're at a certain growth point or a certain plateau where it's like, okay, we want to get to that next stage. We're going to have to bring people on. So, I think we're there, so that should be happening relatively soon, where we should at least bring on maybe a couple people. So that'll be really exciting. So I think that definitely is a key component of making this sustainable is hiring individuals, bringing them on, because if it's just myself, my father, and to your point, someone down the line says, "Hey, I don't want to do this anymore," it could kill the whole thing. If it was just family run, now that's not to say we don't want to have that interest. We're trying. And my own kids are a little bit young right now, but as they grow older, to really make them part of things, right? So that they kind of grow up with, like you were with your father's, carpentry business and woodworking, and that you need to have that person as part of it so that they grow up with it, that they have an interest in it. So it's not just something that you keep close to the vest and then on your deathbed you hand over and the person's like, what's going on here? So we definitely don't want to do that. So that is part of my plan to be able to help pass that along. And it's not just me, of course, I have other brothers, my father, but to make sure that it's sustainable in that way, but also making sure that we have, as we grow, enough employees, and treating them as we should as a Catholic employer, right? And as people and not as just a number or a line item to make money. So that's another thing, to actually be able to retain that talent, and not just treat them as a cog in the machine. So that's just a couple of things for me. But I'm definitely looking forward to, hopefully, as again, Lord willing, as we grow, we can cement, let me just put it that way, we can cement our ability to sustain it in the long term, as we grow it a bit further and we're able to get more individuals in to help us.
With family businesses, I've noticed that oftentimes the downfall is relationships among the family. So how do you guys kind of go about trying to, or maybe some of your experiences around learning to work with each other? Because learning to work with family is a very different dynamic than just, being a colleague of somebody. Do you have any kind of practices to help learn how to get along, or are there any particular benefits that you've seen through running the business that have helped you guys come closer together as a family?
Yeah. So the and we're rounding this corner ourselves right now from a hobby to business. And so when you're in a hobby, it's like no big deal, right? It's we're all having a kind of a fun time doing this, but now when it's, oh, okay, now there's all this money on the line, it's a real business, then things heat up a bit more. So that's been something as well, because I'm working a lot with my father, my brothers on this. It really is about, for me at least, it's about being okay with the fact that I'm not always going to get my way. I'll put out my views on certain things. If there is a lively disagreement on a certain direction or a certain decision, but ultimately I also have to be okay with, at times, the fact that I'm not going to get my way, and to just be partly resigned to that. And again, not to bury differences, and not to just be quiet and not, I'm not going to say anything now because I know I'm not going to get my way with it, and then have this bitter resentment or something like that. But just to be able, as a group, to have that ability internally to express yourself, your vision, your disagreements, but at the same time not be able to take it too personally, and to be able to walk away and be okay with the fact that things aren't going to maybe always go exactly how I've wanted. And that's happened. That's happened a few times. We've had our own disagreements internally, and sometimes I will say I've not always been right, So I've had disagreements where I've not won that particular battle, and sometimes it's actually turned out for the better for the
Mhm.
brewery. So I also keep that in mind that sometimes I don't know
Yeah.
everything, and that's okay too.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, it's very easy for people to, if you believe so strongly in something, right? Especially if you're in a family dynamic, like, I'm the oldest of 8 kids, so if my brothers and I ever do business together, I have to be very conscious of the fact that just because I'm the oldest doesn't mean I'm right, and being willing to hear one of the younger boys' opinions, perhaps, right? So this is something I know I'll struggle with someday, but I do find it fascinating because the idea of a family business is, it requires a different level of emotional intelligence where, there is a lot on the line. There's also your customers. And once you have employees, there's employees on the line, which you have an absolute moral responsibility to learn to get along, to learn how to have disagreements properly, maybe read some of Patrick Lencioni's books around, how to disagree on things in companies. But I just find it really fascinating. It's a dimension that most people don't think about with a family business. They see Succession or something, and they say, "Oh man, we've got this maybe the anti goal of what a family business should look like. We want to have some harmony here, and it can have a lot of benefits." I don't think many people think about that.
No, you're right. I mean, that's something that is not typically thought about, but is really critical when you think about it. It's again, it's kind of like snuck up on us because it wasn't something that we had thought a lot about prior to, I mean, starting it, because again, it was just a hobby. But now that it's like very real, very tangible, right? You'll
Mhm.
come to these big decisions or crossroads, or we'll run into an issue, and yeah, there might be like really intense conflicting views on things, but you're right, you have to find a way to be able to get along. I mean, not just because it's a business and there's money on the line, but or people's livelihoods if you have other people, but it's like, okay, this is your family relationship. You don't want to just damage a family bond that you have with siblings or your parents just because of some disagreement in the business. So it's really good to keep things in perspective.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's also especially important for people who are building their first business. If it starts to succeed, you have to really think ahead of the new challenges that will present themselves if financial success is on the table, because it will, for people who are unfamiliar dealing with a lot of money, it will be a new challenge, right? And you have to learn how to discuss these things ahead of time, because that's when, this is a lot of, we'll talk about this next actually. um, a lot of people I know, especially a lot of people in my extended family, have kind of purposely avoided pursuing financial success in the world because they view money as evil. But we know that it's the love of money, the greed for money, that is evil, not necessarily money itself, because money builds churches, money builds schools, etc. So, having that kind of foresight to use prudence, which is again a virtue we have, to think ahead, to say what are the things we're going to run into and how can we avoid some of these challenges ahead of time, rather than just letting the emotions or the surprise get the best of us, if you will. So let's talk about this idea of pursuing greatness. Again, like I said, I've got a lot of extended family who purposely avoid this for this reason, right? At least that's what they say. It could be laziness, who knows? But a lot of traditional families do not necessarily pursue it because they kind of have this idea that money is not okay, or it's not a good thing to be after. So, do you have any thoughts on this idea of pursuing greatness as a Catholic, and how we can do that in a good way?
Yeah, I like how you summarized and brought up the fact that it's really the love of money that we need to be careful of. And I mean, certainly that if there's a lot of excess money, I mean, we need to just be cognizant of that. If we are blessed with those type of funds, that we're actually putting it to good use. Uh, so yeah, I mean, certainly, I think to your point about money as well, I mean, we need to, if we're blessed with financial success and we are successful, we need to have a plan or be willing to put that money into good use, to do things like build up the church, schools, reinvestment back into the business so that we can hire more people, support more families, give people better wages, more benefits in the company. So we need to be okay with that type of level of success. And so again, I mean, even I know I'm being a dead horse here, but for me, if it was our company, I just go right back to our statement about the brewing the beer for the greater glory of God. Like, if we're doing this for the greater glory of God, and that is our actual focus and not just a statement, and we're successful and we are trying to pursue things for God, and he blesses us with that, with financial success, then that's a good thing. And we should do it to do all things for him. So again, this is not a bad thing. But again, we should want to, plan ahead and think about what are we going to do with those funds? Like, if we are blessed in that way, how can we then make the best use of those funds so that it's not just squandered and spent on petty things, but putting that money back to use?
Mm-hmm. I think it's one thing I wonder about is there's some founders I've heard of. The guy who founded Simple Modern, he's a Christian, not a Catholic, but he, I believe, has already decided to allocate top line revenue a certain percentage towards charity, and he even matches the charitable giving of his employees, right? And this idea that sometimes we think similar to what would I do if I had $1 million? Why not start doing some of those things now, right? This is like the idea of pursuing entrepreneurship. Like, what's stopping you from pursuing entrepreneurship? We talked earlier about like the comforts of life, and I think one of my mentors who really, I would say, is a big reason why I was willing to make the leap into my own entrepreneurship journey was, he said, listen, I was married with kids already, and I really wanted to start. He was actually a recruiter as well at the time. He said, I really want to start my own business. And I thought through everything that could go wrong. Like, if I had to blow my 401k, spend all my savings, moving with my parents, even with kids and a wife. He said, was I willing to forego or to endure that for the possibility of being able to have the freedom of entrepreneurship? And he was like, yes, I will. So just this idea that we can start doing things now. We don't have to wait till we have a large sales year to start donating money to the church or to other causes. We should be doing it now. We should be allocating now, because I won't. Maybe this is the wrong way to say it, but I've met many people who have decided, even with their kind of, let's say, meager income, to dedicate 10% of it towards the church. They end up getting a raise shortly after, right? You don't want to do these things with the expectation of it, because you can't truly give without expectation of return. But God will use our skills to benefit his kingdom, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, that's something as well for us. I mean, we even started it when we were just a home brewery. So we started our merch store, and, typically we'd have, we have all these different themes, and a lot of times the theme lined up with a cause. Mm-hmm. So that'd be something that we were like, okay, anything that we get in sales, we're going to put X percentage towards, this cause. Like, we did a beer with Mass of the Ages, so we donated back to their 401c. Same thing with different causes for canonization. So we did different beers for different saints, and so they still have causes for canonizations or individuals on the way to sainthood. So we donate money to their causes. So things like that, it's important to start thinking about those now as a business. I mean, those are all things that you can pre-plan, right? It's better up front to think about these things rather than be years down the road and you're like, oh yeah, maybe I should do something for charity or giving to a certain, if you've already had that pre-built in, like, okay, this is what we're going to do, then it's easier to implement that up front rather than down the line.
Yeah, and I think even if people don't already know or have ideas of what even the challenges are, because especially for you're in this situation, this is your first time really building a business, there's going to be many things you encounter which you didn't know were even going to be a problem. But if we, as Catholics, we believe that we should pursue virtue, we should pursue a deep spiritual connection with God, we can apply that same vigor of pursuit of greatness in the spiritual life to pursuit of greatness in our career, if you will, right? Because obviously we all are called to pursue God, and then to pursue our vocation, and then after that we have an earthly vocation. This is my belief, or my structure of it, at least. So I would just encourage people who are in this circumstances, like, develop a mentality that you must pursue greatness in all things because you are given this opportunity and you must be a good steward of it. We know that work is good for man. It's not just something we do to pass the time. It is good for our soul. So we must pursue this idea of being good at it. This is what I love about Opus Dei, is this idea that we can find kind of not salvation through our work, but we can find kind of a depth of relationship with God because we do things well and with intention. Do you have a little bit of time to go over? I know we're at the hour. Do you have a little bit of time?
Absolutely, Silas.
Cool. We'll finish off here. I think we'll be able to get through my questions. You have a product that is in the world. It is something that, maybe you don't even have to be a Catholic to want to drink this beer. If the beer tastes good and you like the logo, you're not anti-Catholic, you might buy it. We need to influence the culture back to God broadly. And your company is something that's doing something publicly Catholic. Do you have any kind of thoughts on how to manifest this? Aside from what you guys are doing with a Catholic beer company, any other ideas on how we can do that as Catholic entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So, for us, I mean, a few things. I think that what you pointed out, Silas, in regards to the beer is true. It's something that we wanted to do with the beer, and not, it doesn't, it's explicit and it isn't explicit in the same way, right? It doesn't say Catholic on it, but it is Catholic, and it screams Catholic. But at the same time, unless you're virulently anti-Catholic, it may not necessarily like smack you in the face as, oh, this is Catholic. So it's kind of in a good sneaky way. So yeah, I would say in general, I mean, a few things, if for us, one of the core things that I wanted to make sure that about our product was that it was beautiful, the presentation. So that's one of like the first things that really brings people in. And that's one of the first things that's one of the things that's always brought people in about the brewery. Is not just the concept, but people see like the artwork associated with it. And like, wow, I love the artwork. And so that would be one thing. I mean, again, it depends on what type of entrepreneur you are and what area you're in. But if you can, it pays, I think, to spend the money on making whatever your product is beautiful. I mean, I think we have such just a lack of beauty in the world right now. So if you could add a bit more beauty back into the world with what you're creating in some way, I would say do that, and people will really appreciate it. So that's one thing. And certainly I would say that, as an entrepreneur, if I would say just in all of your interactions, just to try your best to come across as not just authentic, but also, to live out your faith. And again, you don't need to be like, screaming out in a corner somewhere Bible verses, but just like to be an active representation of the faith to the people that you're serving with your business, so that you don't necessarily need to say, oh, I'm Catholic, but people will get that they will be attracted to you in that way. And so that's just something else that we try to live as part of the business. And then lastly, I would say is just to provide a good, solid, quality product at the end of the day, right? Because some of these other things can only go so far, right? I mean, if you're an authentic, cool individual and you're living your faith, but the product is awful or it's poor quality, it's not what people want, then that's all great. People will like you, but they're not going to buy your product, and it's going to fail. So just to, obviously, for the sake of the business and to be able to have a good Catholic business, you need to make something that people want and that it's quality. Now that's probably a duh statement, but these things about the faith only go, not these things about the faith, but your representation of the faith only goes so far if you also aren't backing it up with what people actually want, and people are willing to come back again to you.
Yeah. If your objective is just to make a lot of money so you can, build churches, and you'll do anything at any cost, even if it's unethical to do so, that's not a valid pursuit, right? As a
Right.
Catholic, right? So I appreciate that. I often, one of the people I look up to a lot is Steve Jobs, because of his idea of, make beautiful things. And obviously, it's very clear Steve Jobs was not a Catholic by any means, but I oftentimes wonder, if people like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk were truly good Catholics, like where could the world be today? Could their technology be created not as a neutral thing, but as something that is intentionally influenced and built in a way that is positive? And this is something I think it's a shame that a lot of Catholics have kind of abdicated this involvement in the world because of how difficult it is to be in the world. So I hope that changes. I hope that we become not afraid and go with a little bit of gusto because we know we've got God backing us, right? Awesome. Well, this has been a great discussion. I think last thing I'll just ask you is there any Catholic business people that you look up to specifically?
Yeah. There's let me give you one. And I've read this story a couple times, and a friend passed it along to me again. But there is the family that runs the Ferrero chocolate company. Is a very Catholic family. They're from Italy, so you're probably familiar with the little balls of chocolate, the Ferrero Rocher, and
Best
it's got
chocolate
the
ever.
it's got the little nuts on there. Well, that was actually in honor of Our Lady of Lourdes,
Ah,
the
okay.
chocolate. So actually, the little nuts on there are supposed to look like the grotto behind Our Lady. And in fact, the head of the company, he passed away about 10 years ago, but he would bring his employees on trips, I think every year to Lourdes. He had even statues of Our Lady in the buildings. He treated all of his employees as a Catholic employer should. So to me, that's like a great example. And somewhat similar, like we're talking about food, beverage. What that family was able to achieve, and still achieving, is pretty amazing. So I think that would be a really good example that I'd like to strive for. Eventually be able to one day do something like that.
That's awesome. I'll definitely have to see if I can find a way to get them on, and I'll use that as a nice excuse as to why I must buy another Ferrero Rocher next time I see one.
Absolutely.
Awesome, man. Well, this has been a pleasure having you on. Anything else you want to share, or things you want to leave us with, or where people can reach you?
Yeah, so if you're interested in Tridentine, want to see where we're at, where we're going, definitely visit us at tridentinebrewing.com. So that's where we got all links, so we can see where you can find the beer. We got the beer finding map right now. So, Silas is lucky that we're in Wisconsin, but we are looking to expand into other states, other Midwestern states, including Illinois here early 2025, and keep on making it available. So I know that that's always a constant question that I get is, can I get this in California? Can I get it in Florida? What about Pennsylvania? And the answer is we're slowly getting there. We're going with a brick and mortar approach because the laws for shipping beer specifically direct to consumers are very difficult. Only about 11 states allow for it. So we're going with the brick and mortar approach, staying legal and expanding that way. So everyone's prayers are appreciated. And of course, if you're able to find the beer, financial support is much appreciated. So you can find us there. And then we're on social media as well. So primarily on X and on Instagram, you can find us, Tridentine Brewing on Instagram and Tridentine Brew on X. So follow us there for all of our latest updates. And as I mentioned, any prayers, that's our most valuable thing to keep this running. And I'm definitely convinced that we wouldn't be where we're at without the many prayers of friends and family. And so, if nothing else, if your viewers can spare us a prayer for the project and that goes according to God's will, then that would be much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll certainly be doing. And I can vouch for the beer. You sent me a sample package. We were able to have it at Christmas time. That was amazing. Shared it a little bit. I will say my favorite was probably the Cristeros. It's just my type of beer. The dark stuff, I stay away from that. But the Cristeros is really good. But anyways, Trevor, this has been a pleasure. We'll definitely continue to pray for your success and watch it as you grow. And I'm sure you'll have more lessons to share as the years go on. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Silas. I really appreciate it.
All right, everybody, that's all for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Let us know your biggest takeaways in the comments of the Substack. And if you're not already a paid subscriber, consider becoming one today by upgrading to support our work. It's $10 a month or $100 a year. And by doing so, you'll get access to all of our paid content as well as our WhatsApp group chat. And if you're feeling very generous and you'd like to support this work in a more meaningful way, you can join the Magis Club. That is $360 a year at the minimum. You can always choose to give more if you feel generous, but that would be very helpful in supporting kind of the cost of the show and also promoting it as we continue to promote these ideas amongst other Catholic founders. So thank you so much for tuning in again. Consider becoming a paid subscriber, and we will see you next time.